Hello and welcome back. Today's guest is LezlyKaye, and Lezly is a saint because this is actually the second podcast that I did with her because the first one I forgot to record it. To have the patience to give me a second chance, really, I appreciate it because she's an incredibly busy woman with an incredible story. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that it happened this way because even though the first episode was so good, I had to bring her back. I think the second episode is even better. So I really look forward to sharing her story with you. Her story starts in as rough of a place as any I've heard. She grew up in a broken home with drug addiction. She was a victim of sexual assault, physical assault, and child abuse, and left home at 14. She then went on to build multiple 8-figure businesses, and her story is really a motivational one. But what attracted to me her wasn't the fact that she'd gone from such a rough start to go and building an empire. It's the fact that once she built it, she realized that it wasn't enough. As someone who is constantly stuck in the grind mindset and isn't particularly kind to myself when it comes to knowing when to take my foot off the gas and relax or smell the roses, as she calls it, I really wanted her to share her story with us as someone who's been there, they've done it, and now can look at it from a different viewpoint. So I think the insights in this one are incredible. She's such an inspirational woman, and I can't wait for you all to listen to it. If I could just ask one favor, if you could please drop a like, a subscribe, or a rating on whichever platform it is you're watching on. The small things go a long way for me, and I really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much, and enjoy. Nice one. Hey, Lezly.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. This is actually take 2 of our podcast because I'm technically inept and didn't record our first chat. But your story was so good that I did really want to share it. So it was worth running it back a second time. Your story starts where a lot of high-powered and successful people's story starts, which is a turbulent childhood, and it led you on to some pretty great things. Would you mind giving everyone your backstory?
I would love to. Thank you for asking. Oh, I never really know where to begin. And I also think I say that every time and then I start in the same place. But I grew up in a childhood full of drug addiction and abuse. I was raised by my grandparents when I was 4 years old, or so the story goes. My grandmother got a call from my mother's neighbours at the time, and basically she'd sort of like left us in a car and forgotten me and my older brother. And my grandmother and my granddad sort of came and picked us up and raised us from there. So I was kind of born into this chaotic lifestyle. Even with my grandparents raising us, there was constantly physical abuse, verbal abuse, and then as I got a bit older, there was sexual abuse as well. So I moved out of home when I was 14 years old, moved in with a girlfriend at the time. As I reflect, I think God, universe, source, whatever you want to believe in, has always kind of put angels in my path that I haven't really been aware of at the time. And as I look back, I think, wow, I don't know whether it's luck or divine intervention, but I've really had some amazing people just in my corner guiding me, and I haven't really been aware of it. So I moved out of home when I was 14. Then when I was 17 years old, I moved to Perth. So I grew up in a small country town called Walkway, actually, which is outside of Gelton. And then moved to Perth, the Big Smoke, when I was 17 with my boyfriend at the time, who's actually a famous DJ now, randomly. And started my first job in real estate. And then when I was 21, I started my first job in recruitment. Fast became the world's best recruiter. I still hold that title today. And as an employee making 700K salaries. So I'd essentially gone from poverty and a broken home to kind of a millionaire overnight. I was only in my late 20s when all of this started to happen, and I was receiving this wealth, and then had my son when I was 31 and founded my first company in partnership, and then went on from there to found my a company solo by myself. And, they're like 8-figure organizations. The first, I think we got to 60 million, got to 60 million in the space of 18 months. And the second, which was self-funded and self-led, was 20 million in the space of 18 months. So yeah, I've had some pretty big wins, but some pretty crazy stories along the way.
What do you think was driving you to be that ambitious in that grind mindset and build something that big that fast?
Oh. It's so interesting because if I look at it with the awareness that I have now, I've spent the last 4 years studying psychology and human behavior and healing modalities and really understanding, I guess, why I am the way that I am and why the world is the way that it is and how we relate with each other. So with the awareness that I have now, I know that I was running away from the fear that little girl had. I sort of found safety in money, and I found safety in success, and I found safety in having power. I was like overly masculine, I guess. Like I built those businesses with hustle and control and grit and determination. Very different to how I'm building my business this time around. And it caused me a lot of pain in growing in that way. I, left my marriage of 10 years at the helm of a multi-million-dollar business because I kind of it was shown to me how I was behaving. And, it's like when you see something, you can't unsee it. And then I have spent the past 4 years learning these behaviors and teaching other women how to not hustle and grind. And I want to say build businesses in a masculine way. But the drive back then, I kind of just knew that my intelligence, I got ducks at the school, I got straight A's in English Lit. So I kind of held on to that and I was like, all right, I can use this intelligence to like get me out of here somehow. I think I had fantasies of like being a journalist when I was 17. I dropped out of high school, not because I was dumb, because I was bored, and studied journalism. And I had this fantasy of, writing for the New York Times or something. And then as soon as I started making money, so sales for me, like as soon as I hit real estate and I understood sales, and I was like, oh, okay, so if I learn this skill and I nail this, basically the sky's the limit and I can make all the money that I can. And there was a bit of delusion that money was going to buy me happiness. It didn't, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But yeah, I think the motivation for me was like, I can see a way out of this and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get myself there.
At what point did you realize that money wasn't the security that you were looking for and the answer?
Yeah, in my second business, I say to people I've always been a high achiever and I kind of hit a midlife crisis early. So I'm, 37, so I'm 33 years old at the helm of this multi-million-dollar business. I have the husband that loves me more than he loves himself. I've got a Range Rover, a designer everything. I take 5-star holidays around the world, and all of our friends are like driving Ferraris and literally like the Instagram-worthy picture-perfect lifestyle. And I was married to a man that would literally give his life for me, and I was absolutely miserable. I was quintessential in the room full of people and had never felt more alone. I would be at dinner with our friends, never felt more alone. And for me, I was like, okay, so I've reached this pinnacle of multi-million-dollar business, multi-million-dollar salary, all of these things that the world tells me I should have. And I hate myself and I hate my life. And at that point, it actually gotten to 110 kilos because I was suppressing my emotions by eating food. So I was unhealthy. I was unhappy. And I was like, what is this lie that I've been following? I thought the more money I made, the happier I would become. And it really just wasn't the case.
Do you think that now you've had the money, you can talk about a life without it and say that wasn't the answer? And where I'm going with that is if people are listening that haven't made that money and haven't had that lifestyle and that's their North Star, would you still advise them to realign before they've achieved that goal?
Yeah, I want to say I'm in the throes of making another multi-million-dollar business. Don't get me wrong. I didn't wake up and was like, actually, I lie. For 6 months, I sort of immersed myself in the spiritual community, sold all of my designer things, ran around barefoot, thought about buying a van and driving around Australia. And, it was beautiful and I probably needed it. I probably needed the nervous system reset. But I kind of got to these places and I was friends with these people. And again, beautiful people, a lot of them are still in my life. No shade. It's just not my flavor of living. And I was like, we're not going to make change here. Like, how can you impact a world that values money so heavily if you don't have money? How do you actually give yourselves the things that you want? And I think people that say, I don't need much, it's true. I mean, I went camping the other day and all camping made me realize was I fucking value a hot shower and I value my $5,000 mattress that I sleep on and I value the organic food that I get to eat. So there is a lot of gratitude that comes from understanding that not everyone has everything all of the time. And I think that's a really important thing, but I would rather do that in controlled environments at festivals. And I don't believe if we're struggling ourselves or if we don't have, so money, for example, buys marketing. It buys reach. It buys capacity to have influence in some way. And it's not about like buying influence, but for you to be seen and heard and listened to, more importantly, you can put yourselves in rooms with people that have power and influence that are still heart-led. And I think for me, when I sort of denounced money for that 6 months that I did because I thought that was the root of all evil, I didn't really have a purpose. I didn't really have a North Star. I didn't really have anything driving me. And so I kind of just laid around and again, there is a lot of philosophy that, like be here now and be in the moment, but it just wasn't enough. It really felt like giving up on life. It really felt like giving up on myself. And it really felt like I'd sort of just bowed out of making change in the world. Like I can't make change if nobody knows who I am. I can't make change if nobody listens to what I have to say. And for me back then, it was like the Blues and the Aubrey Marcuses that all had these, big podcasts and Know Thyself podcasts and all these sorts of platforms where I was listening to these people and I was like, these guys have reach, they have influence, they have impact. I would rather be serving the world. And so like I'm in devotion to my mission. I'm making money through being in service to helping people evolve as business leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs. That feels more true to me than completely disconnecting and being like, nah, fuck it, money's not the answer. I want to say it amplifies what's already inside. So still keep it as your North Star, but make sure you know who the fuck you are as you build your business, because otherwise you will get there and you will be like, I hate myself. I hate my life. I don't know who I am. I need to find a purpose. And if you run a business well, it's not mutually exclusive. Like for me, if you want to know yourself, get in a relationship or start a business and use it as a platform to evolve your own internal leadership.
You mentioned with your last business that you didn't have a North Star and you're either driven by running towards something or you're running away from something to get you there, right? What difference does it have on your mental health, your life, when you're now building a business whilst you're working towards something rather than running away from something?
Yeah, I love this question. I spent my whole life running and my motivation was I just don't want to be poor and I don't want to end up like my family. But then when I broke through that motivation, when I wasn't like my family, when I was smart and wealthy, it wasn't enough to sustain me. And so the difference for me is when you're working towards something, working towards a North Star, it's like there's fulfillment in that. And I say this to the people in my word all of the time, you don't need to be motivated if you're in service to something greater than yourself. So if you're sitting here thinking like, I'm not motivated to do what I know I need to do to move the needle, it's probably because you're moving away from something and not towards something. So on the days that I don't want to get out of bed and I want to go lay around in the sun, have someone feed me fruit, which is often as a woman, I literally am like, okay, what am I in service to here? Like what is bigger than me? What is bigger than my excuses? What is bigger than my problems? What is bigger than the parts of me that don't want to show up for myself and for humanity almost? And it sounds really big and it sounds really corny, but I truly believe that people that are crazy enough to think that they can change the world will. And so for me, like if I can help one person not live a half life or accept half love, then I'm happy. I would do it for free every day. I wouldn't because I have boundaries, but I would. Like if someone said you never have to worry about money again, what would you do? I would still show up in service to people evolving.
To have a drive that is giving you fulfillment even in the process makes the process more enjoyable. And I'll be honest that right now I'm in the process of building something where there isn't anything bigger than me in this. I'm the only person to hold myself accountable. I'm doing it really for me and a few people that have asked for their guidance in the course that I'm creating. And some days I have that where I wake up and I just don't have that drive to get up and go. And it's been a bit of a battle with myself. And what you were saying about having that drive of working towards something versus having something that you're running away from, I find that I personally work best when I've got both. They did a study in the States where they tested rats and they wafted in the smell of cheese from one end of the cage. They tied a spring to their tail and they could measure how hard they were pulling towards the smell of the cheese. They then wafted in the smell of a cat from the other side, and the pull from the rat was twice as hard as the pull towards the food, which is an indicator that running away from something is more powerful than running towards it. Then for the third test, they put the smell of cheese in one side and the smell of the cat from the other, and lo and behold, the rat pulled twice as hard again. So having both of them there is indicative of having the best results. But what they didn't test in this is the rat's mental state whilst this is happening, right? And I guarantee it was a lot happier running towards some cheese than it was with the smell of a cat up its arse.
Yes. And I want to say, I mean, I still use both. I don't want to fail. Like I haven't come this far to only come this far. I do a lot of PR stuff, and even in sharing my story, it's like I didn't crawl hands and knees on shards of glass and pull myself from the depths of hell to sort of stop now. So there is a motivation for me of, I want to say actually, and I talk about it as long as you're aware of your shadows, it can be a lot safer to be in relationship with them. But I'm motivated by not wanting to fail as much as I'm motivated by wanting to be in service. It would suck if my story finished at built 2 8-figure companies, had a spiritual awakening / spiritual crisis, sold all of her stuff, traveled the world, took a bunch of plant medicine and then disappeared. Like that feels like I've kind of done my story a disservice. So yeah, I actually think it's healthy to have both, but yeah, what I want to highlight here and what I know about psychology is if it's just the away from, the fulfillment's not there. The drive might be there, but again, you're going to hit this destination and probably realize that you've wasted most of your life. It's funny because people used to say, Lezly, stop and smell the roses, and it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I used to literally laugh and be like, well, whatever, go away, I'm making no time for your philosophical bullshit. And now I'm like, guys, stop and smell the roses. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, because I got to the pinnacle of like, cool, this is the destination. And I realized I didn't really have a relationship with my ex-husband. He didn't know who I was. I didn't know who he was because I was too busy making money to actually be in a relationship. And not even just making money. I was too busy avoiding myself, avoiding my trauma, avoiding my pain, that I didn't know who I was. So how could I expect him to know who I was? I didn't have real friendships either. I didn't, in my divorce, I lost all of my friends, so they weren't even friends in the first place. And Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like we don't have to do this in isolation. Like find your people, find who you're going to go and build with. Like whether it's finding a partner that's aligned, and people often do one of two things. They build the empire and then find the king or the queen, or they find the king and the queen and they build together, or they find each other when they're prince and princess, whatever, and they build together. I don't see the point in building something if you're not going to have people in your corner as you build it. And again, it might not be a relationship, like whether it's coaching or friend groups or whatever it is. There's so much conditioning to think that we have to be the lone wolf, or that we have to, hustle harder and isolate ourselves and focus and get shit done. That is what makes it painful. Like for me, when shit went south, it wasn't actually that shit went south. There's still a trigger. There's still a pull there. I felt a little bit of emotion. It wasn't actually that shit went south. It was that I was alone in it when shit went south. Like entrepreneurship's fucking hard. It's not a walk in the park. Like, don't take my highlight reel as this is what my life is like. Some days I cry all day because I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? And where am I going? And what are the decisions that I need to make here? I always make them. I have the tools and the resources and the people in my corner to help me move through the stuck moments in my business. But yeah, I would say one of the biggest lessons was I isolated myself. And it made the highs not worth it. And it made the lows almost unbearable. And if you think of this, like if people only want to be your friend when you're winning, are you really going to believe that they're your friend? Or do you want people that come up with you and support you along the journey so you have a belief and a knowing that they're with you because of who you are, not what you can provide for them?
The highlight reel comment got me as well, because people are always jealous of the destination. They're not jealous of the journey to get there, and they don't see everything else that's gone into it to get where you are, right? And there's so many facets of my life that I can relate that to. And one other thing I wanted to dial a little bit back to was when it's time to smell the roses. And I feel like I already know what you're going to say, but I get this question all the time, which is, how do you know when it's time to take the pressure off yourself and just relax? And I always answer it the same way. When I find out, I'll let you know. So maybe you can enlighten me and the people that have asked me that as well, because I personally suffer from a big guilt complex. And whenever I have like a day where I do nothing and take my foot completely off the gas, I'm unhappy for it. And it's because I'm sort of beating myself up internally, where this isn't what I set out to do. I'm falling behind in this imaginary race. What advice would you give to me and to the people that are asking me this question?
There's a few things here. Sometimes you just have to reframe your down days. I literally enjoy laying around getting a tan. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's why I travel to Mexico and Costa Rica and Bali. And there's a part of me that feels the same. There's a part of me that feels like if I'm not achieving or doing something or, in some form of moving my business forward, that I'm failing in some way. Or I feel like I'm in a race and I'm not going to get there as quick as I want to get there. So I do a few things here. On days where the guilt is going to consume me more than actually working, because that is a thing, and then you can go into shame spirals, I will actually study. So for me, whether it's an audiobook or a YouTube video or a program or, I'm halfway through a sex, love and relationship certification right now. I just love learning. I love new modalities. I love understanding the world that we live in. I will go lay naked in the sun and I will watch a video, because in the part of me that needs validation or reassurance that I'm moving the needle in my life, I might be laying around naked, but I'm actually moving the needle in my life. So I work with my personality to be like, okay, I understand how you're going to feel on the other side of not being productive. Now, I will touch on the bullshit that is in a second, but just to give you all some skills on like how to work with yourself rather than shame yourself. It's like, what can you do that is going to make you feel like you're moving the needle? And I have like a non-negotiable list of things I have to do in a day, like send out matches, post on social media, speak to 5 people. So on the days where I'm like, I don't think I can do anything today, I'll at least try do my non-negotiables, because then in my mind, and I call them money-making moves, because connection and conversation moves the needle in your business. So I will do those like things, and they might take an hour, sometimes 2, depending on what I'm doing, and then it's done. Or I will literally be like, do you know what? I'm not doing anything today. I'm just going to lay around and I'll listen to an audiobook or watch a podcast, because I reframe in my mind that education is still moving the needle forward, because I'm like habit stacking my regeneration with learning a skill that's going to help me advance my business or help me support people more. I also want to say that you're no good to anyone if your mental health declines. And your mental health will decline if you do not make space for your joy and your pleasure and your play and your happiness. I went to the festival on the weekend because I was spiraling, and I've got a mission. I haven't seen anyone all of winter. I'm just going to keep on keeping on with this. And, 2 days out of, and I didn't even post content. I didn't even do my non-negotiables. But I always ask myself, like, where's the motivation coming from? And what do I think I'm going to achieve? Because if I try force myself, I might half-ass some things and not really do a good job anyway. But if I give myself the grace of like, do you know what? And so I talk about reparenting a lot. So actually what's happening inside of us is there's a part of us that wants to be rewarded, and a part of us that is probably being programmed by a parent that we only receive love if we're achieving in some way. So my granddad, God rest his soul, and like I'm very grateful, used to reward me when I used to get good grades in school. And so programmed into me is the high achiever. Again, it's one of the reasons I'm so successful, is because I equated success to love, or being worthy of receiving love. And it's often a program that runs through high achievers. So I will then speak directly to that part of me, like literally like I'm speaking to a child. And this is where parts work and inner child work actually helps you reprogram. And I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll be like, Lezly, I love you. And I'm going to love you whether you achieve something today anyway. And it helps because I have a 6-year-old. So I know that when he doesn't feel like doing something, whether it's, brushing his teeth or going to the shops, sometimes he just needs me to provide him with more safety. If you think of children, all they want is safety. So if I'm feeling unmotivated, I'll also say to my little girl, what do you need to feel safe in this moment to do the things we know we need to do? And I kid you not, a little voice inside of your head will be like, fuck you, you've been working me too hard. I just want to eat ice cream and watch movies. And you can negotiate with these parts of you. Like, this is psychology. It's not some pop culture. We all have parts. Basically, we're all just fragmented parts of ourselves. And to come in, to bring the psychology with the strategy, when we can bring these parts of us into harmony and working on the same team, we have a lot less motivation issues. And on the days where we feel like shit, we can actually understand why. And when you can bring love and compassion to these parts of you, like with a child, I want to say what has been true for me and the women that I support has been they swim in the shame a lot less. They swim in the shame a lot less because they actually understand what's happening inside of them, rather than just thinking, I'm lazy, I'm not going to achieve anything. They can actually, you can relate with yourself. And this is what I say, business is relating, because you start to understand, why you do what you do, and you can bring love and compassion to those parts of you.
Since not having an employer fairly recently and being autonomous for the last couple of months, I'm definitely finding that. I had a period maybe about a month ago where I spent 5 days wallowing in that shame pool, as you call it. And then there were a couple of days actually earlier this week where I was falling into a similar track. And I've got a good friend back in the UK, and I called her and was talking to her about it. And I told her that yesterday I ate 2 meals. The first one was a Domino's, the second one was a Taco Bell. I didn't leave bed all day, and I was disgusted at myself. I felt shame, disgust. I was just pretty miserable. And she said to me, that's okay. It's like one day out of, God knows how many in a year where you die at some point you're training out. And I was like, no, don't try and tell me that's okay. And she was like, it's like you want me to tell you you're disgusting. And because I felt like that myself, I felt like reinforcing that would be what I needed to then get up and get going again. But as you put it earlier, that's you running away from something, and it's also not listening to your own inner needs. And she said to me, rather than trying to shame yourself out of that puddle, take a step back and look at what's happening in your life that's causing you to want to fall into it in the first place. Because if you don't bend something in your routine, in your schedule, in your work ethic, you're going to keep breaking. And that's, I haven't got to the answer of exactly what it is, but it's true. There's something, because that isn't like me to do that twice in 1 month. There is something in how I'm trying to push myself right now, or something in how I'm managing the stresses of moving to a new country, setting up a business, building a course and everything else, which is so stressful. But there's something that I'm not handling right. And through going through this journey, I am getting to understand myself better. And I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm bloody going to. And I'm going to learn how to manage myself better through it. One final point on that, where you mentioned you talk to yourself like you're talking to your child. I've heard that before, where if you treat yourself like your good friend or your own child, and you saw your good friend struggling the way that you're struggling in that moment, you wouldn't berate them. You wouldn't be doing what I've been doing in my head this week, being like, you lazy piece of shit, like, you're disgusting, you're never going to get anywhere. You would pick them up, you would give them a hug, and you'd say, right, how have we ended up in this mess, and how are we going to get out of it? Mm-hmm. And that's something that I also need to start working on as well, I think, because I wouldn't say I'm my own good friend.
1000%. I want to say the world tells us we're not worthy enough, and we need to reinforce how worthy we are. And one thing I would ask you is, like, whose voice is it? Because it's often a parent, a teacher, someone that is imprinted a belief system with something that's happened. We actually form who we are between the ages of 0 to 7, and then we mimic people from the ages of 7 to 14. So the way we treat ourselves is actually an internalization of the way we were treated as children. And you don't need to have, I started this conversation with like, yeah, I've got all of this big T trauma. We could internalize, even if you had the most active parents or the most available parents in your life, but they didn't know how to show you love. They didn't know how to tell you that they loved you. Maybe they sent you to boarding school, or maybe they worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. As a child, you can internalize that as I'm not lovable, or I'm not loved, or I'm not worthy. And what we do as adults is we rationalize our childhood with our adult minds. So we go, nah, they did everything they could and they loved me as much as they could, and I'm so grateful that they worked 2 jobs. A 7-year-old has no fucking clue of rationale and logic, or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. They're just thinking, I want mummy's attention, I want daddy's attention, and when they don't give it to us, we think they hate me or I'm not lovable. And then what happens is, we go into school systems and we get an award at school. And as I'm saying this, I do this to my son too. Like, I come to his school to watch him get an award. And I'm a busy working mum. So like, I'm programming into him that if you achieve something, I will show up for you. And it's in like the small moments as well. It doesn't have to be the big moments. So if we can understand this and then, speak to ourselves like a mum or a best friend and be like, what would it have been like for our parents to say, like, I love you no matter what. I don't need you to achieve. I don't need you to be a good boy. In fact, when my son's throwing a tantrum or he's expressing anger, I make a point of saying, buddy, I understand what you're feeling and I love you in this emotion. Because we're so conditioned, and it's no one's right or wrong or good parents or bad. Like, they just didn't have the awareness. And we get to reparent ourselves in the way that we wanted to be parented as children, and we get to rewrite the narrative in our subconscious mind.
Parenting is such a thankless task. It's because of what you're talking about. I guess I was lucky enough to experience the opposite, which came with its own issues. Have you heard of the gifted youth complex?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where it goes the other way, where your parents tell you that the sun shines out of your backside no matter what. And my dad, I only realize this now as an adult, but whenever I achieved something well or I did something good, he would say, that's because you're a Murray, as if, it's like it's the genes that did the work. And it left me with this entitlement that the world was going to hand me a living, that no matter what I did, I was going to be great at it. So I never had to put in work. And it took me until my 25th birthday, where I was an unemployed, uneducated dosser, to realize that the world isn't going to hand me a living. I'm not as talented as everyone told me when I was 7 years old. I've looked at my artwork there, which everyone told me was amazing. It was shit. So it's our parents' first time going through lives too. And the truth is, they're never going to get it 100% right. They are going to, no matter how good or bad their intentions, they are going to instill trauma in you. And you owe it to yourself to unpack that as an adult. Because what you're saying there, that you don't realize the logic of it in your youth. For example, my parents got divorced and they went through a messy separation for 7 years. And I think about it with my adult logical mind. Well, everyone gets divorced these days. It wasn't that bad. I got 2 sets of presents at Christmas or whatever else. But then I think about some of the other issues that I've got now to do with my belief on relationships, my inverted commas commitment issues. And has that come from the fact that when I grew up, I didn't see any happy long-term relationships? I saw pain in relationships and I saw them fail time and time again. So yeah, do stop and think about the logical explanations you have for things now. Does your subconscious agree with you?
No. No. I've been in this work like head first, like took 2 years off pretty much, deep dived into psychology, my trauma, my healing. I know a lot of this stuff in theory, but I haven't been in a relationship since I've been divorced. So there's an awareness around all of this, and I have a lot of business acumen because of it. I understand human psychology because of it. But similar to being in business, like we're also not going to know until we do it, until we're actually in it. Like until you've got skin in the game in a relationship or in a business, you're not really going to know. Everything can be used as a mirror. So even like friendships in relationships and connection, the way we relate and show up with everyone in our lives is a reflection of the relationship that we're in with ourselves. How we deal with clients is a reflection of the relationship that we're in with ourselves. The reason that motivates us, one of the biggest feedback that I get in the work that I do is that people feel really safe with me. Now, my trauma is I never felt safe. So I've created spaces to make people feel safe because that's what I crave. I seek to understand, so I have a capacity not to judge. I just get really curious. Like you could literally sit across from me and be like, I killed someone. And my first question would be, how did we get here? Like, can we walk through the steps and like how we made this decision? Because my first response is curiosity. I truly just see little boys and little girls walking through the world, perpetuating their pain. And I have so much love and so much compassion because I want to be understood. Like I crave nothing more than for someone to be like, I understand you. And I want to continue to show up and I want to continue to understand you because that's what I crave. So I give the opposite to the world because that's what I'm desiring back. We don't really know our subconscious mind ever. We can't. It's impossible. We can use modalities to access it incrementally. So breath work, psychedelics, hypnotherapy, some forms of meditation. We can use these modalities to get into our subconscious mind and to start to shift some of our belief systems. We can bring these belief systems into our awareness, but our ego, his job is kind of to trick us. And ego is not a bad thing, by the way. People that say like we need to kill the ego and ego is a bad thing, your ego is actually kind of your best friend. It's the one constant in your life. It's like literally the voice that you hear and think with and speak with. And for me, it's about integrating the parts of yourself that you deem as wrong or unacceptable or unlovable, especially as entrepreneurs. You know, I remember having 60K cash paydays. And I kid you not, before I started to do the work, I would receive the money and a little voice inside of my head would be like, if people knew the childhood you came from, they would take this money from you. I'd speak about my childhood all the time now. Nobody gives a shit. But back then, because I was so locked down and so afraid of myself and shame is actually one of the biggest ones. I held so much shame. Like, God, if people know the childhood you had and the things that you did, and, you know, even as a teenager, I made some quite unsavory decisions and choices. So I used to receive this money and be like, oh, well, I'm a bad person or I'm evil and I'm not even unworthy. Like, I'm a bad person and I'm evil. And it was when I started to actually pay attention to that voice. It's the same as the voice that's like, you're fat or you're unworthy or you're a piece of shit. And rather than ignoring it or trying to like push it aside, I started to ask it why it was saying what it said. So my biggest hack is like, if your voice inside of your head's like, you're a piece of shit, ask it why it thinks that. And really sit with it and be like, why? So a hypnotherapy tool is when you ask questions over and over again, you do get in a little bit of a trance and you start to get underneath the conscious mind, the ego, and into the subconscious. But our ego, so our prefrontal cortex, our consciousness, our thoughts, would rather keep us stuck in a familiar hell than allow us to evolve to an unfamiliar heaven because it's safe in what it knows. So if your subconscious is keeping you stuck in belief systems that are literally keeping you in poverty or shame or disconnection or, I don't know, self-abuse, you will stay stuck there until you can create enough safety to allow your ego to let you evolve into the version of you that allows happiness and joy and pleasure and all of the good things in life.
I had a guest on my podcast couple of weeks ago who said that one of her main focuses at the moment is rewriting that narrative and convincing herself that she is worthy of money. And, you know, she's started a business now, multiple businesses, and is starting to have that. And she's suffered with that guilt complex as well, telling her she's not worthy. And it's so hard to start unpacking that voice in your head, right? Because I speak to myself terribly whenever I'm having bad days like that. But the rational part of my brain tells me that's why I'm a driven person and that's why I'm successful now and why I'm going to be more successful in the future, because I don't allow myself to get fat, to get lazy, to take multiple days off work. How do you know when that voice is actually saving you from this potential car crash?
Yeah.
Because I want to shut it off. I want to be nice to myself, but what if being nice to myself means that next week I'll treat myself to 2 days with Domino's and Taco Bell?
This is one of the biggest fears that I faced and is probably the biggest entrepreneurial question is like, what if there's an awareness almost, and this was my awareness too. What if being broken is what is making me successful? I'm no longer broken. I'm still making money. I feel doing it alone, you probably have more chance of losing more of the goal or losing more of where you're going. I want to say taking a year off and going headfirst into it, like I didn't care about money and I had the privilege to do that. If I was to do it again, like if I was to go back in time, like with the awareness and the woman that I am now, I wouldn't have closed my business. I wouldn't have left my husband because I have the awareness of all the ways in which I was avoiding myself, all the ways in which I was avoiding responsibility, all the ways in which I was playing a victim, all the ways in which, do you know what, actually, I was just sick of feeling alone. And if I had the reason I become the woman that I am is because if I had have had me in my corner back then, I wouldn't have taken the hard road. I would have had someone hold my hand to move into the version of me that I was becoming and know that it was possible to do so. And like for me, it's like holding both parts of you, like holding who you are and where you're going and understanding that some days it's going to feel slower, but we have the vision of the version of you you're becoming and we have the vision of the life that you want to create. And having someone remind you that like, hey, I love you unconditionally. I love you in your mess. I love you in the moments that you don't love yourself. Like, I love the parts of you that you don't feel are lovable right now. And not to like mollycoddle or belittle your own journey, but sometimes we just need to borrow belief from someone else that it's possible. And we just need to borrow belief from the people that have gone on the journey that we're not going to completely lose ourselves and we're not going to lose our competitive edge. And it's possible to hold both versions, but I truly believe that it is harder if you're trying to hold both versions on your own. And again, I did a lot of this, like when I came back online to making money, I did a lot of this because I lost it all. Like, it's not like I had millions of dollars to invest in this business. I literally had to start again, tooth and nail, like fight my way back to the top. I spent all my money on ayahuasca retreats. I mean, I did ayahuasca 5-star. I didn't go to the jungles of Peru. I had Peruvian shamans, but I wasn't in the jungles of Peru. Anyway, yeah, I want to say, you know, I borrowed belief from podcasts, from audiobooks, from, you know, coaching containers that I was in. And I started out with coaching containers that cost me $5,000, and then I moved up to coaching containers that cost me $100,000. But I didn't there was no excuses. Now, subconsciously, there's victim mentality that weaves through all of our consciousness. But I never allowed, like, again, the pain of failure and the pain of staying stuck in the version of the woman that I was way more painful than my unlived potential. Like, for me, the more that I walk this path as well, the more that I'm like, fuck, I literally was living a half life. It was only half of the picture. It was only half of my capacity to be the woman that I am.
You only see that now though, right?
I only see that now, yeah.
What would you say to anyone who might be in that state at the moment, but they obviously don't have the self-awareness to realize it because they haven't been to the other side yet?
I want to say, like, even in what you're saying, you know that there's more, right? There's an awareness in you. And this is what was true for me. There'd always been this like nagging feeling that there was more to life. I just kept ignoring it. And then, you know, they say the universe taps you on the shoulder and punches you in the face. You know, if I had have listened at the tap on the shoulder, my life would have been a lot less painful. And I think we also think that we're invincible and it's not going to happen to us. And, you know, our partner's not going to leave us and the business isn't going to fail. And, you know, yeah, we do think that we're invincible and that this story is not going to be my story. But I want to say that everyone that knows that there's more to life has this nagging feeling of like, I understand that I understand that there's more available to me here, and I'm going to actually answer that call. I'm going to like open that door. Because as well, one of the biggest killers, and especially of men in business, is the isolation that they feel, is the pressure that they feel, is the, you know, I shared on my Instagram Brene Brown's TED Talk which actually makes me quite sad, but where she was like, you know, they tell you to be more vulnerable, but you know, it was his wife and his daughters that were basically would kick him when he was down, and not intentionally. It's just how we're raised as society. And I think we just aren't meant to do this alone. We're not meant to have all the answers, and we're not meant to, I don't know, be this lone wolf that is striving to achieve something. And again, whether you're just starting out and you can't afford a $5,000 mentor, a $20,000 mentor, or, you know, whatever it is like $14 for an Audible subscription. Most stuff, you know, podcasts are all free. Borrow belief from the people that are in the place that you want to be, whether that's mindset, mentality, heart-led, whatever it is, money, and put yourself in their frequency. Like, I kid you not, I like saved my life by binging podcasts because I felt like I'd lost my mind. Like, I felt like I was crazy because I wanted to make money, but I also wanted to be deeply spiritual and connected to purpose.
Podcasts have been similar for me, and it's what led me to want to start them, because at that point in my life, I say, where I reached the realization that the world wasn't going to hand me a living, it was listening to intellectual conversations and conversations that understood the mental journeys that you go through when you embark on missions like this. And I wanted to get involved in that as well and start sharing my own story with others. Lezly, you've been amazing. Even second time round, I'd say was better than the first. I had a feeling that was going to be the case. If people want to keep up with you, where can they go?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place. It's where I'm the most active. So my name is spelled different because I like to be different. So look at the show notes. It's Lezly with a Z. Add me on Instagram and slide into my DMs if you have any questions.
I'll make sure to pop your handle in there. Thank you so much again. And you've given me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, a lot to think about.
My absolute pleasure.